All right, hello again. So in this video, we're going to go over some commonly used CSS selectors. So I think you've seen selectors, obviously, in some other videos, but I thought I would just kind of gather a bunch of them. These aren't all of them. There's lots and lots of selectors, but these are probably some of the most used ones, but there are more. There's a lot more, actually. But these are the most common ones. Just to make sure that we're all on the same page, just to review a tiny bit, hopefully it's review. The parts of a CSS rule. So you've got the selector, that's what you're modifying, right? So in this case, we'd be modifying the code tag, and that is called the selector, right? So there's lots of different kinds of selectors. And then you have your braces, or your curly braces, some people call them. And then you have a property and a value. So in this case, the property is font size, and then the value is 20 pixels. So each of those property value pairs are called a declaration. If you have a bunch of them or more than one and you separate with a semicolon, don't forget the semicolon, that's called the declaration block. So you can put as many as you want in that declaration block. Another thing to see is a couple definitions. So we've got, let me see if I can zoom correctly here so you guys can see a little better. So there are different ways to talk about objects in the document object model or the document structure, if you want to call it that. So there's parents, children, descendants, things like that. There's siblings. There's no aunts and uncles and stuff like that. Cousins, maybe no, there's not really. But there are a lot of different things, right? So parents are anything that is one level up in the document structure. So this head would be the parent of these guys. This body would be the parent of these guys, but not these. Descendants means anything below the document. So the child would be directly below. So these three would be a child of the head. These would all be children of the body. But they're also descendants, right? So anything below children and below is a descendant. So these are all descendants of the body, but so are these. So I'm telling you that because these are relevant for some of the selectors. There's children selectors, there's descendant selectors. There's kind of a parent selector with using the has selector, which is not in this video, but yeah, so hopefully that helps a little bit. Maybe you'll see that somewhere else actually. So you just need to go open this file that I kindly made for you guys. I got a bunch of formatting code in here, but you're gonna go down to where it says add code below here. And the first one we're gonna do is the type selector, which looks like a tag, right? So I'm gonna put in code, and then I'm going to say font size and do 20 pixels. So what that does, and you saw over here, the code, anything with the code tag on it, change size to 20 pixels. So all this is code, this is code, this is code. So since we're doing this in the head as embedded or internal style, this style is gonna work throughout the page. So it's kind of, it is efficient that way. But it's pretty non-specific this way because we're saying that every code, right? So we're gonna get more specific and do some different things as we go along. And I've actually got the code that you're supposed to put in there, right there. So, but you guys can type it, I think, right? Hopefully. So the next one is a grouping selector. And all that means is you can put a comma between things that you want to have the same styles on. So I just put H1, comma, H2, comma, H3. That means we are applying the same styles to all three of those. And I'm gonna do font, family, and I'm gonna choose Franklin Gothic, the second one down there. So I just started to type that right, and then it comes up, you guys know this already, but in VS Code, it should prompt you with some common font families. So that changed the headings, all the heading level 1, 2, and 3s to Franklin Gothic medium. So you could write that separately for each one, but to be a little more efficient, you can do them all at the same time. So the next one is called a class selector, which is a very popular selector, most popular selector, voted most popular selector in high school in 1975. But I call it a free agent selector. You can apply this to anything. But the downside is, or not anything, you can apply it to a lot of different things. The downside is you have to go into the HTML and add an attribute for class and add it in directly into the HTML. That is a little bit of a downside. Used to be classes were used a lot, and then people decided to use descendant selectors a lot because it was more, you didn't have to go into the HTML to use a descendant selector, which we'll get to. But now classes are getting popular again because of frameworks like Tailwind that use what are called utility classes, classes that apply a certain thing, like a color or a style or something. So you'll see tags with tons of classes in them, basically. But anyway, so that is a class. So you can tell a class is a class because it starts with a dot or period, if you want to call it that. I'm going to say dot highlight. So they start with a dot. They can start with a letter. They cannot start with a number. So don't forget that. I found that out the hard way a long time ago. For some reason, I don't know why, but they can have dashes and underscores in them. But you're basically making that name up, right? So I'm going to say background color, and I'm just going to put in a color. You could probably put a different color, but I'll put an EOEC5A. So this is not going to work. That is on this guy here. It's not actually working yet because, like I said, you have to, this should be forget. Don't forget to add the class attribute to the tag. So I'm going to scroll down. Sorry, I have to scroll. I'll come back in a second. To the one that says class selector. And it says this paragraph has the highlight class. It doesn't have it applied yet. So to apply it, I say class equals highlight without the dot. And you can see that VS Code knows that I already made that class. So it populates it for me. So I don't have to type the whole thing. And there is the highlight class. So I could apply that more than once if I wanted to. If I said, not that you have to do this, but I'm going to go up here and do it again. I'll just paste that there. And now both of those have the highlight class. So you can reuse it, which is the good thing about classes. So yeah, so you have to actually define the class here and then apply it by saying class equals. Similarly with IDs, and I left the T off here too. Similarly with IDs, except an ID can only be used once. So that is one of the main differences between a class and an ID. You can use a class as many times as you want. You can use an ID once because you're basically naming something. So it starts with the pound sign, and then I'm going to say unique element, if I could spell it. Element. And then, so it's unique dash element. You have to make sure that these names match exactly, both for classes and for IDs. So an ID, a class starts with a dot, an ID starts with the pound or hash or octothorpe if you want to get fancy. Unique element is the name. So I just named that, right? And then I'm going to go in and put a border in. So I'm going to say border, and let's do 2 pixels solid, and let's do RGB. And we'll do 21, 168, 160. So if you've never seen this before, maybe you have, maybe you haven't. This is the border shorthand. This is the border width, 2 pixels. The border style, which is solid. There's a video for this, specifically for this kind of stuff. The box model. It's in the box model video. And then the color, right? So that's the shorthand. It would be, you could do it in 3 lines, border width, border style, and border color. But you still have to apply this guy. So just like class, you have to apply this. And remember, you can only use it once because you're basically naming something. It's used a lot with JavaScript too, by the way, and other things, I guess. So I'm going to copy this name so I don't have to type that again. And I'm going to go down to, I have to go back in the HTML. That's the downside of it. And it says this paragraph has the unique element ID. It's about line 127. It might not be exactly for you guys. And I have to say ID equals, and then I'll paste the name in. So it should say ID equals unique element. And then if you look on my page here, there it has that blue little border, that 2 pixel solid kind of a turquoisey blue border. Yeah. So you do have to apply it, and you can't use it again because you named it, right? So like I said, it's used with JavaScript and things like that. The next one is a very popular descendant, not a selector. Maybe it is more popular. Maybe it's the alpha, Heather at school and the beta Heather. No, you guys don't know Heathers. That's an old movie. Don't look it up. It's very bad, very mean. Okay, so we got descendant selector. So I'm going to put P space and EM. And I'm going to say color, just do color red. We'll keep it simple. Normally you wouldn't use colors using the assigned words like that, but it'll be faster that way. So what does this mean? So this means a descendant selector means that it styles descendants, right? So this is going to style every EM element that is a descendant of a paragraph. What does that mean? It just means it's inside of it. It's nested inside of it, right? So if we look here, we've got a paragraph here with an EM element in it and a paragraph here with an EM in it. I don't have to go apply that. That's the good thing about a descendant selector. It's just targeting things, but it allows you to say specifically what you're targeting. Here's another EM down here. I think that's an EM, but it's not inside a paragraph, so it is not selected. If I did, just to mess with you guys a little bit, if I change this to div, I think it'll change this one to red. And that is also in a div because there's an outside div there. But so it just means that it's inside of something else. So remember, if we look at our illustration again, if I had an emphasis tag that's inside of a paragraph, that would be a descendant. It's also a child in this case. But if I put body, space, and EM, that would also be a descendant. It doesn't have to be one level down. It can be as many levels as you want. So I could have a body with a paragraph in it and then an emphasis tag in that, and that will work if I put body, space, EM. The body is kind of the ancestor of almost everything, so it's kind of redundant a little bit, but hopefully that makes sense. So that's a descendant selector. They can get longer too. You can make them as long as you want. So if I had, let's say I had that. That means an anchor tag, which is a link, right? Inside of an emphasis tag, inside of a paragraph, that would be red. I don't think I have any of those, so none of those are red, I don't think. Yeah. All right, there we go. That's a good one. That's a very useful one, very, very popular. Maybe more popular than class, I don't know. You'd have to ask around who's the coolest selector, I guess. The next one is called the child selector. I always say it has kind of a creepy name, but I'm going to put div and then the greater than sign, which looks like a tag. It's a little confusing that way. And then EM. And then I'm going to do, let's do text decoration underline. Yes. So here we go. We've got this. This is an EM that is the direct descendant of a div. So the difference between a child and a descendant is it can only be one level down. If I look down at the code, sorry to look at this down there, but let's go down to child selector. Where is it? There it is. So here we've got an EM that is directly inside of this div. There's nothing in between, right? It's not div and then a paragraph and then EM, or that wouldn't work. It would be a descendant, but not a child. Child is one level down, like what parents and children, right? Not a grandparent or a great-grandparent or anything like that. So that is the child selector, and you can see it's working right there. I put an underline on that guy. All right, the next one, we got quite a few left actually, is called a pseudo class selector, and in this case we're doing it on a link. So I'm going to say a colon and hover. You have seen this before, I'm pretty sure. That is sort of a breaking the anchor tag into pieces because there's hover, active, link, and visited, right? You guys know that already. So we're saying a hover, and we're going to do color green because we want to speed this up a little bit. So what does that mean? Now when I hover over this link, it turns green right there, right? So that is a pseudo class, which is kind of pretend class. Yeah, I guess that's a pseudo class. We're going to do the next one, which is similar. We're going to do a first child selector, which is another type of pseudo class. Let's do first child. So I did P first child. That means the first child that is a paragraph, first child of a paragraph. or first child that is a paragraph. And we're going to do color purple, I guess. Let's do purple. We don't want to do the same color. All right. So here's what happened. We've got two paragraphs here. This is a paragraph, and this is a paragraph. The first one, though, which is the first child, means it's the first child of its parent. Its parent, I think, is this div here that you can't really see. So only the first one is purple, if that makes sense. If I inspect this, remember you can inspect any of these to see what's going on. Here's the div, right? Make that bigger. Here's the div, which is the parent. Here's the first child, it's purple. Here's the second child, it's not purple because it's not the first child. The first child is the favorite, of course. So it's purple. And yeah, sometimes the first child is the favorite. All right, so that one's that one. That's good. Now let's do adjacent siblings. So there are brothers and sisters. Well, no, they're not gender specific. Adjacent siblings. Let's leave the gender out of it. Let's do H2 plus H3. And then we'll say color, and then this time we'll do FF00FF, which is going to be kind of purple, I think. And it's kind of a bright pink. Yeah, sort of. So adjacent sibling, what does that mean? That means that any H3 that directly follows, oops, I'm going to mess this up. Any H3 that directly follows an H2. So that's what adjacent sibling means. It means it has the same parent, but it follows it directly after. So here's here's an H2 right here. Let's inspect this so we can see a little better maybe. You can see there's an H2 and then a bunch of H3s. This one is the one that immediately follows the H2, so it uses that adjacent sibling selector. This is not directly following an H2, so it does not work there. So these are all H3s here, but only this one is selected. Make sense, right? So that is called an adjacent sibling selector. Let's just copy that and do a little, now let's not copy. That'll just get me in trouble. I'm going to do H4. See, if I would have copied it, I would have messed it up. H4, and then the tilde, like Tilda Swinton, close personal friend of mine. Worked on a movie with her once. That's a different story. We're going to do H4, and then the tilde, and then H5. The tilde is right below your escape key on your computer. If you didn't know that. It's a little wavy thing. That's the technical name, the little wavy thing. So we've got H4 and then the tilde H5. And then we'll do color. And this time I'm going to do a different color because we're going to get our colors mixed up here. 3D778F. Boom. And what happens? So here's what happens. So we're looking at number 10, general sibling selector. That sounds like something you get at like Popeye's Chicken, but it's not. So what does that mean? A general sibling means that it's a sibling. So an H5, this means an H5 that is a sibling of an H4. But it doesn't matter if it's the first or second or whatever. It's just all the H5s that have an H4 as a sibling. Yeah. So here's an H4, right? Here's an H5 and here's an H5. They both have that color. It's such a pretty blue color. They both have that color because they're both siblings of this guy, because the parent is, let's look, the parent is this list item. So here's the H4, here's the H5. Those are both siblings of this H4 because the parent is this list item. So remember, the parent is anything that's one level up only. All right, we're getting there. We got a couple left. So we've got, the next one is called an attribute selector. And there's a bunch of variations on this, but I'll give you one. And I think there's a different video that you probably will see later with more stuff on this. But I'm going to say, so this uses the square brackets or square braces. I should probably find out what those are actually called. The square brackets, they're underneath your regular braces, your curly braces. So then you're going to put type in there, equals, and then in quotes, you're going to put button. And then you're going to use your curly braces. So what does this mean? The selector means any so it's called an attribute selector. So it's selecting attributes. This is selecting any type attribute that is equal to button, basically. So let's do a background color, and we'll do just like a gray. So this is what's going on right there. That's doing this, right? So we say type equals button, but in square brackets, that's selecting every element on the page that has a type of button. And type is an attribute, right? For, well, if I look at it, I'll have to show you in a second. And it's going to be a gray background. That's why it has a gray background now. Let's look at the actual element so you don't get confused. I'm going to go down here. Sorry. I know the scrolling is like disorienting. So here we have a button, right? Right there. We have a button with a type equals button. So it's looking for this type attribute, and it's looking for it to be equal to button, and it's styling it directly. So it's really specific. It's kind of cool. You can target things by any attribute. You could type, you could say, there's a lot of things you could do, but anything that has a href of Google or something like that. That's a bad example, but yeah, there's a lot of different things you can do, and I think I have another video for that. So, but anyway, it's pretty cool. I think it's cool. All right, so the next one is called a pseudo element selector. So I'm going to do, and I had to make this a little fancy because it was conflicting with other ones. I'm going to do p.mark, and then 2 colons, and then first line, and then color, let's do orange. I don't think we've used orange yet. If we look down here, oh, look at that. So we put p.mark, 2 sets of colons. It used to be 1, little trivia, way back in the day, and then something came up and they changed it to 2. So sometimes you might see it with 1 if you look at old code. But if I look at this, the first line there is orange. I didn't put, this is the cool part, we didn't put anything around that. If I look down at that code, sorry, I have to scroll one more time. This guy, right? Pseudo element selector. So there's a P class of mark. There's nothing around. Where does it end? It ends on the word this. The first line of this section will be affected by this. Yeah, right there. That is what is orange, right? The first line in this section will be affected by this, blah, blah, blah. There's no tag around that. There is a paragraph with a class of mark. That's how I got to that. But it's doing it dynamically. If I can get this to resize, oh, look at that. So if I resize my page, the first line gets shorter or longer, right? Because it's reflowing. So look at that. Now less words, or fewer words. I should use my good grammar today. Now there's even fewer words that are orange. Now there's more. So it's dynamic. That's pretty cool, right? I think. I keep saying things are cool, and you're like, no, they're not. But they are. Trust me. All right, so that is the first line pseudo element selector. The last thing we're going to do, I think the last thing is the universal selector. So I'm going to do P and then greater than sign and then the asterisk, or yeah, asterisk sign. I think there's another name for that. And we'll do color. Let's do RGB again, just for fun, just to be a little variety here. Let's do 135, 37, 177. What color is that? I forgot. Oh, it's a purple again. Yeah, well, it says right there, purple. So what does that mean? So the universal selector, if I took this off, there, I just took it off. That is the universal selector by itself. So I have a little note in there, sometimes not recommended for global styling due to performance reasons. If you put the universal selector like this, it literally has to look at every element and try to make it purple. Every single element on the page. Used to be that was a big no-no because of performance reasons, because it would force the browser and your computer to be like, oh, I got to figure out what is everything's got to be purple. But I think it's, it's getting a little bit more used, especially for, it's not usually used like this, but sometimes it will be. Like to turn off margins and padding, for example, and resets. Sometimes you'll see it like that. What I did, though, is I did that. So what did that do? That meant a child selector using the universal selector. What does that mean? This means anything. So the universal selector means anything, basically. Anything that is one level down from a paragraph. That means everything that is one level down from a paragraph should be purple. But it's being overridden by other ones. So that's why not everything is purple, but hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So this paragraph has, if we go down here, let's look at this one. This is a little tricky because there's some cascade rules going on this one. Oops, I lost it. Here it is. Yeah, universal selector. So here we've got a paragraph and it has an emphasis tag, but the emphasis is red. That's because our other style is overriding that. So it depends on the cascade and some things too. But here's a strong element, and that is not being overridden because we didn't have anything that said P space strong or P child selector strong. So that strong element is purple. Yeah. So there is the cascade is at play a little bit, and some of the specificity rules are in play. But yeah, you will see this used with child selectors and descendant selectors. Like, I want everything inside of this thing to be something. Everything inside of the header to be green or something like that. So you could use it like that. Okay, I think that is it. So hopefully that helped a little bit with selectors. Like I said, there are many, many more, some very fancy ones, and there's kind of new ones all the time, like the has selector and the not selector and things like that. There's probably videos for some of that stuff that you will see later. Maybe not. But I hope that helped a little bit, and I will talk to you again later.